the Boundless Authenticity Podcast.
When you manifest, do you call in spirit? Do you imagine what you want? Do you use your right brain or your left brain? Well, I'm Laura Van Tyne, and I will be hosting a manifestation mastery course this coming January. And this isn't going to be your typical wishing and hoping and vision board kind of course. We're diving into strengthening our intuition, removing those pre-programmed belief structures, and working in the quantum field and more to help you achieve what you want and you deserve. Join us now by clicking on the link below.
Thanks for tuning in to the Boundless Authenticity Podcast. If you love the show, please like, share, and subscribe. On this episode, I'm introducing you to Steve Frazier, entrepreneur, wellness coach, and founder of Release the Coffee Cups, the viral movement helping people break free from caffeine addiction for good. After 23 years running multiple restaurants and living on endless cups of coffee, Steve discovered a powerful path to natural energy, mental clarity, and emotional balance. His best-selling book and 8-week coaching program teach science-backed tools to quit caffeine without losing your edge. Tune in because Steve is going to share how to reclaim your focus, sleep, and peace naturally. Visit releasethecoffeecups.com. So how's it going?
Life is outstanding.
All right.
That's all I could say. It is great. And it's great to be here with you, and a great introduction. Thank you.
So I know that there's a bunch of people that are probably just not even going to listen to this, or they've turned it off by now, but everybody loves to have their morning cup of coffee or their tea. So Why are we saying that caffeine is one of the biggest lies that we've been sold?
Well, it's $1 trillion business. And when you have that kind of money involved, $1 trillion is almost beyond our comprehension. And so they have a vested interest in making sure, and when I say they, I mean, it's all the people that are involved with caffeine or caffeine related products. They have an interest in keeping you buying their product. And it is an addiction. And people say, well, I'm not addicted. Okay, well, it's okay. And I'm not here to judge you or shame you. Okay, I'm not anti-caffeine. My book is not anti-caffeine. I would make an observation that if you quit for 24 hours and you don't have a headache and you don't have brain fog and you don't have fatigue, then you're not addicted. And you're one of those individuals that it's not affecting you. That's rare. And all the things I'm going to talk about tonight, they're generalities. There's always exceptions to every rule. Each one of us processes caffeine differently by our genes, by our enzymes that are in our body, by women, particularly in the part of their menstrual cycle, right? And we'll talk about that later. But it comes down to the fact that coffee and or caffeine is often hyped as a good for you thing. And before I get into my whole spiel about all of these, I'll just bring this up. There's a major influencer, not just in the United States. I believe he's probably worldwide. He sells coffee, and he's making millions and millions of dollars. And 2 weeks ago, he did a reel, and in 47 seconds, he said these things. He said, if you drink 4 to 5 cups of coffee a day, that you're going to live longer, and that Americans, people in the United States, get 67% of their antioxidants from coffee. And the first statement he made is just blatantly BS. Okay. There's no studies that show that. He's in this, and people are listening to him. So, and that's okay. They have to, we all have free will and free want. And we are responsible for our health. No one else is. And so if we want to listen to this guy, so be it. Now, the second part of that statement about the antioxidants is ironically fairly correct with some caveats. And that is that people in the United States get so little antioxidants from any food that they eat, and they're drinking so much coffee that they are getting the majority of their antioxidants from the coffee. And if that makes sense, it should make sense. They're not there to eat blueberries, kale, all these antioxidant rich foods. Now, we look at all this and you say, why could this be? It really comes down to the studies that have been done, and I deep dived on this after I watched the reel. They're like 500,000 to 1 million people, and they showed a little bit of longevity because of the polyphenols and things that are in the caffeine. They're in the coffee. However, most of the studies that were done with these large groups were done with caffeinated coffee and decaf, and the results were the same. What does that tell you? It tells you that the caffeine is not relevant here. Okay, the caffeine is not the thing that's making you live longer. And caffeine is not good for you, as we're going to talk about a number of things. Okay, and because ultimately it's a poison that the coffee plant produces to keep insects from eating it. And it is a very bitter taste. And so, and when you take decaf, when you get decaf coffee, the caffeine they take out of the beans to make the decaf, they actually sell that to the soda company and to the energy drink company and wherever else they're going to put it. And what they do then is they put it in their products to make you addicted to it, because there's no health value to it and there's no taste value to it. So why would you put it in there? You would put it in there because it actually creates a need and a desire to have more of that. And why is that? Well, I can tell you what your normal day looks like if you're not drinking caffeine. Okay, your normal day is get up, and this is how I live my life. I was a heavy caffeine user in the past, and I had a health scare 11 years ago, and emergency room visit. I had premature ventricular contractions, which happened for me. I could feel them, and it felt like I was having a heart attack. I quit caffeine, and like every good addict, I thought I could handle it, and I went back on. And so, 6 years later, which was 2 years ago, then I just quit cold turkey, which is brutal. Don't do it. Just don't do it. But that's a whole nother thing we'll get to maybe later. So when I get up, I go and I look at the sun. If the sun's up now, it's dark at night, dark when I get up in the morning. So I have a sun lamp. And what that does is it helps boost my natural cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone that is created by your body to give you energy to start your day and then get throughout your day. And as my day goes on, my cortisol goes down and melatonin and adenosine goes up. I'll get to adenosine in a minute because a lot of people don't really know what that is. So your cortisol is a stress hormone, but it's also there to give you energy. Melatonin, a lot of people are familiar with it because they take it to go to sleep. That's not a big driver of sleep. The big driver of sleep at night, natural sleep at night, is adenosine, and that's in your brain. And the caffeine molecule is very similar to the adenosine molecule. So when you drink caffeine, whether it's first thing in the morning or mid-afternoon or whenever you drink it, the caffeine molecule goes into your brain and plugs the adenosine receptor. And what that does is it makes it so you're not tired. So in a normal circadian rhythm, that's the cortisol, melatonin, adenosine cycle. At night, you naturally just go to sleep because the adenosine puts you to sleep. And that's the way our bodies are wonderfully and beautifully made until we start putting things in them that screws everything up, for lack of a better way to say it. And the adenosine receptors are crucial because they're going to put you to sleep. When they're plugged, you mentally don't get tired. And that's why you can conceivably go for a long time mentally without sleeping. But physically, you're going to be exhausted. And the term would be wired but tired. Now, when you drink caffeine first thing in the morning, whether it's coffee, tea, energy drink, whatever, soda, you automatically disrupt your circadian rhythm because when the caffeine hits you, it jumps your cortisol up to levels that aren't supposed to be there because your cortisol is already going up. It also spikes your dopamine, which is great because it makes you feel good. Dopamine is a wonderful hormone in the human body. It's like the nature's version of crack cocaine and heroin and meth, right? I mean, I'm guessing. I haven't done that, but that's my guess. Dopamine is a wonderful thing until you are doing it all the time, and then your adrenal glands say enough. This guy's kind of teasing me because he's artificially stimulating your adrenal gland. But another big one then is caffeine, when it hits the adrenal glands, stimulates adrenaline release. Now that's adrenaline is also a stress hormone, and it's considered the fight or flight hormone because what it does is it makes it so that you're ready to fight something or run away. Ironically, what happens is that if you're drinking caffeine throughout the day, and every time you drink caffeine, you're taking your dopamine, your cortisol, and your adrenaline, you naturally put glucose into your muscles because it's fight or flight. And your body says, I need to be strong. My legs need to have more energy. My arms need more energy. But if you're sitting at your kitchen table or drinking caffeine, you're not in fight or flight. And so then the glucose will in turn spike your blood sugar because you're not using it. Well, your natural reaction is your pancreas is going to pump insulin into your body to bring your blood sugar back into place. Now, as you repeat this, and it's a rinse and repeat cycle. As you repeat this, at some point, your adrenal glands get tired. They still pump stuff out. Your pancreas is going to get tired. It's going to say, wow, it's asking for all this glucose all the time for fight or flight. They're not in fight or flight. So how bad do you really need that, right? And so ultimately, it's going to lead to some form of type 2 diabetes, maybe pre-diabetes. You're going to end up with higher blood sugar levels because your blood sugar is not stable anymore because you're messing with it all the time. And that whole circadian rhythm is just messed up. And I'll go into the stages of sleep right now because that's heavily influenced by caffeine. There's 4 stages of sleep. And, people talk about them, don't really pay much attention. The first stage is where you're just falling off to sleep. You're in a subconscious state. You're half awake. It's 5% of sleep cycle. The next cycle is stage 2, and that's about 40%. And what happens in that is you have some brain activity. You may or may not dream at all. Okay, it's just kind of you're just sleeping. Now, stage 3 and stage 4 are crucial. Because stage 3 is where you heal. And that's where men produce testosterone, women produce estrogen. It heals the cells in your muscles. And when you upset your circadian rhythm with caffeine in particular, that stage is activated later and it's shortened. And then you get to stage 4. Stage 4 is REM sleep. That's rapid eye movement. Now that also that's where you dream and you're getting a lot of really restorative sleep. That stage is also shortened and it's also activated not as fast. Now those 4 stages actually happen 4 to 6 times a night. So it's not just once. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it repeats 4 to 6 times. If those stage 3 and stage 4 are shortened, when you wake up, you're tired. And what's the first thing that you do? You look for caffeine, whether it's coffee, tea, soda, energy drink, because you need that boost in the morning. Now, for somebody that's listening to this that has no intention of quitting caffeine, and that's okay. It's your life, it's your body. The question would be, can you wait for an hour after you wake up? And the first thing you do in the morning is look at the sun and then also drink 20 ounces of lemon water. Why would you do that? Simply because that rehydrates your cells, because you become dehydrated overnight. And ironically, caffeine is a diuretic. So if you first thing in the morning drink caffeine, you're going to start to pee. And you're not just peeing out water, you're also peeing out magnesium and calcium, which are important minerals in your body. And if you are not supplementing them, you're going to be in deficit. And I'm not giving you medical advice. I say go to a natural health practitioner. I can tell you, if you look at magnesium glycinate, that's something a lot of people get to go to sleep at night. It's a good thing to supplement with. Again, I'm not giving you advice. Talk to somebody, a natural health practitioner particular. I don't know if an MD is going to even know what I'm talking about, okay? Because they don't necessarily deal with that. So in the book that I wrote, I have the first chapter, which originally was the last chapter. It's called Story. And as I put it together, I realized that this was really important because everybody that's going to read the book, when they read that first chapter, is ultimately going to see themselves somewhere in those 20 stories. And of those 20 stories, give or take one or two, 19 of them undoubtedly said that the biggest thing that happened, improved when they quit caffeine, was they slept better. They slept like they never couldn't in their memory sleep. And one guy said he now wakes up and it's like he's having a double or triple shot espresso. And it's all natural because your body is designed to do this. And so when you look at the stories and you realize that across the board, sleep was the biggest factor. Sleep is one of the foundations of your health. And I want to go back a step and say that, there we go, caffeine intoxication. There we go. Would you like to just touch on this for a second?
Yeah, as you're talking, I just figured I would bring this up because you're talking about the same thing, right? They have insomnia listed at number 4 on this list. So it literally says caffeine-related disorders. Now, the interesting thing about the DSM-5 is that they get a lot of their funding from the people who lobby for coffee. And so you'll see at the end of this section that a caffeine disorder, even though it's labeled caffeine-related disorder, they try to disqualify at the end by saying that they need further research because, as we know, all of this stuff is bought and paid for. And so they can't tell you enough that would actually shut down the supply of caffeine, right? But what they do say, because again, we're not against caffeine, but what we're saying is that caffeine intoxication is a thing for many people. Nutrient absorption being disrupted is a thing for many people, an alarming number of people, millions, billions of people. What we're also saying is that caffeine is genetically modified to be 200 times or more stronger. We have certain brands, I can't call them by name, but one of them has to do with death and wishing. And they kind of engineered these other brands like Folgers, especially the instant. Typically, it's the instant coffee that is genetically modified Arabica or Robusta. Robusta being one of the most dangerous ones because that can be 200 to 300 times stronger, which is unnecessary. And so there's an appropriate use of caffeine and there's an inappropriate use of caffeine. And we are conditioned to lean towards the inappropriate use of caffeine. And it's killing us, right? Yeah. It's blocking symptoms of serious medical conditions that go undetected, because if you are just adrenalized, you don't realize that you're having these symptoms. It numbs the body. Am I correct?
Absolutely. If as you look at this list, you got restlessness, nervousness, excitement, insomnia. These are symptoms that many people have, and they don't know that it might be related to the caffeine that they're drinking. And it's scary, and in particular for women, women have a lot more hormones, a lot more stuff going on. And caffeine can dramatically affect their anxiety and their nervousness, and also can have a dramatic effect on their menstrual cycle and their PMS symptoms, as far as the pain they might have and irregular periods, be heavier, lighter, whatever the case may be. These are affected by caffeine. And here's an example. In a woman's menstrual cycle, in the luteal phase, which is 14 to 20 days, that's right before they have their period, her body processes caffeine 70% slower. So that means that the half-life of caffeine, which is 5 to 8 hours, now increases to 8 to 12 hours. And so if a woman that's in that phase of her cycle has a cup of coffee, and a normal cup of coffee has probably 150 milligrams of caffeine, if she drinks that at noon, at 10 o'clock at night, she still has 75 milligrams active in her system. And I'm not about to tell you, and I never will tell you, that people that drink caffeine don't sleep, because they do. It is. You go to sleep. It's the quality of your sleep that's disrupted. And it may cause you not to be able to fall asleep right away. I had a podcast host a couple weeks ago tell me he drinks a Diet Coke at 11 o'clock at night and goes right to sleep. Well, he's the exception. Okay, he's not. If you do this, and maybe if you do it every night, you're just so tired you just go to sleep. Okay, so I can't discount his story. I don't think it's good for him, and he's not getting a good night's sleep, because obviously drinking caffeine that late at night puts your body, your circadian rhythm, into just straight chaos. And there's many documented instances where people that are heavy caffeine users, their circadian rhythm is actually flipped. And what happens is that they are wide awake at night, and they're dead tired in the morning when they wake up. And that has a lot to do with withdrawal, because you can get withdrawal from caffeine in 12 hours easily. So if you wake up in the morning and you have just a slight tinge of a headache, you just think, well, I got a little bit of a headache. But you have brain fog, you have some fatigue, and you're reaching for that caffeine, and that's going to juice you back up. And it's simply that the whole rinse and repeat cycle again. And I talk about this in 14 of the 16 chapters of my book. We talk about rinse and repeat. It's an endless cycle. And you all know, you understand what I'm talking about. And, it's a rare person who can just have one cup of coffee first thing in the morning and not have any more. And that person that's doing that probably is okay. And if you drink caffeine 2 or 3, even 4 times a week, but not every day, that's it. And it gets rid of it. It just disposes of it. Because it has no health issue for you, has no nutritional value. But at the end of the day, you don't want to do it every day if you don't have to, because it is going to probably upset your circadian rhythm, which then upsets your sleep. And I'm going to go back to the beginning. I got started on this. Why am I here with you today? Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Before we get into that, let's read this so that everyone that is listening to the audio version will benefit.
Oh, so, I see. Sure.
This is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, Volume 5, from the American Psychiatric Association. This is the Psychiatric Bible. The heading is Caffeine-Related Disorders. It covers caffeine intoxication. Yes, that's a thing. Caffeine withdrawal. That's a thing. Other caffeine-induced disorders. Unspecified caffeine-related disorder. We'll talk about that one in particular because that's the most interesting part. So the diagnostic criteria by which they determine whether you're suffering from caffeine intoxication, it says that recent consumption of caffeine is typically a high dose well in excess of 250 milligrams, and 5 or more of the following signs or symptoms will develop during or shortly after caffeine use. That's restlessness, nervousness, excitement, insomnia, flushed face, diuresis, gastrointestinal disturbance, muscle twitching, rambling flow of thought and speech, tachycardia or cardiac arrhythmia, periods of inexhaustibility, and psychomotor agitation. And the signs or symptoms in criterion B cause clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. The signs or symptoms are not attributable to another medical condition and are not better explained by another mental disorder, including intoxication with another substance. So, diagnostic features. Caffeine can be consumed from a number of different sources, including coffee, tea, caffeinated soda, energy drinks, over-the-counter analgesics, and cold remedies, energy aids, example, drinks, weight loss aids, and chocolate. Caffeine is also increasingly being used as an additive to vitamins and to food products. More than 85% of children and adults consume caffeine regularly. Some caffeine users display symptoms consistent with problematic use, including tolerance and withdrawal. See caffeine withdrawal later in this chapter. The data are not available at this time to determine the clinical significance of a caffeine use disorder and its prevalence. That's an interesting thing to say, right? Because they're being funded by the people who don't want you to know that the abuse of it looks exactly like alcohol-related disorders. Okay? So in psychology, within a psychological context, I'm not going to read too much more of this, but within a psychological context, we have a category of beliefs called permission-giving beliefs. And these are the thoughts that we have, for example, another cup won't hurt, or to make it easily relatable to the average caffeine user, oh, I can't wake up without my coffee. So you have all of these self-justifications which prop up your use of this substance. And yes, caffeine is a drug. So the essential feature of caffeine intoxication is a recent consumption of caffeine and 5 or more signs or symptoms that develop during or shortly after caffeine use. Symptoms include restlessness, nervousness, excitement, insomnia, flushed face, diuresis, and gastrointestinal complaints, which can occur with low doses, example, 200 milligrams, in vulnerable individuals such as children, the elderly, or individuals who have not been exposed to caffeine previously. Symptoms that generally appear at levels of more than 1 gram per day include muscle twitching, rambling flow of thought and speech, tachycardia or cardiac arrhythmia, periods of inexhaustibility, and psychomotor agitation. Caffeine intoxication may not occur despite high caffeine intake because of the development of tolerance. The signs or symptoms must cause clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. The signs or symptoms must not be attributable to another medical condition and are not better explained by another mental disorder, example, an anxiety disorder, or intoxication with another substance. Now that part is interesting. It must not be attributable to another medical condition. Okay, I could accept that. However, caffeine is usually one of the underlying common threads between a lot of people and the reason why they have certain medical conditions. So I also say it's not better explained by another mental disorder, example, an anxiety disorder. And yet all of the medical journals, British Medical Journal, the APA, etc., have all documented that when you remove caffeine from the equation, whether it's through chocolate, an additive in ketchups, or otherwise, 42% of anxiety cases and panic attacks disappear. What could that mean?
Yeah, who would have ever thought, right?
If anybody wants a copy of this, I'll gladly send it to you. But we will resume the rest of the interview and let Steve talk about how he got into this.
But thank you. That's incredibly interesting, and it's good to see objective facts, even though everything that I'm telling you basically is objective facts because I did it. I have 300 references in my book. I'm just not making this stuff up. But it is nice to have people. It's a reaffirmation of what we're talking about and what we're going to talk about.
Oh, this stuff can be found anywhere. People act like it's hidden or something like that, but it really is not.
Yeah. No, but I'm gonna touch on cognitive dissonance for a second before I go into my story, because some of the things that you mentioned, just about the coffee, I can't do this. What's one more cup, right? What will that hurt? Cognitive dissonance is when you have certain beliefs that you've held for probably a long time, possibly your lifetime, and all of a sudden new information is introduced to you that counteracts what you've believed your whole life. And generally speaking, in society, cognitive dissonance will win every time, and you will ignore the new evidence. Okay. And this is human nature. And I start out one of my presentations with a Folgers commercial. It's waking up to Folgers in your cup. And it's got mom's making the coffee, and you could smell coffee. And I'm watching this on a commercial, 20-second commercial. She's making the coffee. The bee look fantastic. She makes 2 hugs into the bedroom. Dad's sitting in between 2 beds. And she hands him a cup, big grin on his face. He smells it, smells delicious. All of a sudden, 2 little boys pop out of the twin beds, and they hover around Dad, and then they have a big group hug, and everybody's feeling really good. I mean, as I talk about this, I get a dopamine hit just talking about it. Now, just think of how many times this happens every day around the world, where kids are seeing their parents. First thing they do is drink coffee. And what are the kids? The kids are being programmed to say, this is how we successfully adult. This is how, and we're going to be happy because mom and dad, mom's got her mug in her hand and it says, don't talk to me before I drink this. Right. Let's face it, these kids and kids are programmed. Their subconscious is programmed up until they're 7 years old. And you can look at Bruce Lipton on YouTube. He does some great work on this. And you can reprogram yourself, which we do in our program. But it's a lot of work because reprogramming is hard because you have to now change those long-held beliefs. And so cognitive dissonance is really important to take into consideration when you're going to hear some of these things, because you may not like what you're hearing, simply because you've been led to believe that this was good for you and there's no harm. Okay. So my story, I've been an entrepreneur for 40 years. And when I started, I was drinking caffeine. I could have almost used an IV. I drank that much caffeine, coffee, Coke, cappuccinos, because I worked a lot of hours, 10 to 16 hours a day often. And when you work from when you get up to when you go to bed, you can work 16 hours a day. And so what I would do is I would drink caffeine during the day and I'd have a beer and a shot of tequila at night to go to sleep. Bad cycle, very bad cycle to get into. So 13 years ago, my wife got sick and we had to proceed to see 17 doctors. And what she called them is ologists, because we saw every specialist known to man. And every one of them told her to leave. Many of them blamed her, said it was on your head. Some told her to go on narcotics. And after those 2 years, she was almost dead. And our daughter, Alex, just had started her health practice, his natural health practice. She walked into our house one day and she said, I'm going to test you. And in 15 minutes, she looked at Brenda, my wife, and said, you have Lyme disease from the waist down. And that was confirmed 4 days later by her mentor. And so these last 11 years now has been a rebuilding process. But what that forced us to do is that it forced us to evaluate what we were eating. And because when Brenda got sick and we were going through this, she became celiac. She became grain intolerant. She can't eat any processed food and no nitrates, no nitrites, anything like that. So what happened is that you all of a sudden become really, really good at what's going on, what you're eating. And unfortunately for us, it was forced. Okay. And I went on the same diet as her because I wasn't going to make 2 different meals. In fact, when she went on this on this no gluten, no grain regimen. I went on it with her and I lost 30 pounds in 3 months. I didn't change anything else in my life, but it was simply, and there's glyphosate in there and there's all this garbage, in particular in the United States, they're putting stuff in that they don't even tell you. So my advice as far as that goes would be is if you pick up a package or a can and it has more than 5 ingredients, just set it down. And if you can't pronounce anything on there, absolutely don't eat it or drink it, because the bottom line is they do that so they can put stuff in there that is not good for you, but you don't know it. So fast forward till several years ago, I became certified as a self-sabotage coach. And one of the pillars in self-sabotage is health, is physical. And all the usual suspects are in there, and we all self-sabotage. Okay, but there's alcohol, there's nicotine, there's caffeine, there's drugs, there's prescription drugs, overeating, there's lack of sleep. And I looked at this, and then I looked back through my natural health journey with Brenda, and I felt that caffeine was one that I possibly could have the biggest influence on people. And I'm going to say this again, I'll say it again probably before we're done. I can't, and I will not try to make anybody quit caffeine, because I can't. Because we all control what we put in our bodies individually. Nobody makes you eat or drink anything, generally speaking. And so what I found then is that I can try to influence people with knowledge. Okay, my stance is pro-health and pro-knowledge. And there's only one area where I try to really have a major influence, and that would be with pregnant women. And we're going to get to that in a minute. Because caffeine affects everybody differently. There's no doubt. So you and I could drink the same caffeinated product and you would get a buzz and I wouldn't, or I would get a buzz and you wouldn't, because you definitely get a buzz. Now, the more caffeine that you drink, you're no longer getting that high, because your body is so used to it. You are now just going to a baseline. And so here's a question, which is relevant to everything that we talked about and we'll talk about, is, does anybody really know what it feels like to be healthy? Okay, I'm fairly close, I believe. I'm on meds. I'm 68 years old. And at the end of the day, 30 years ago, I was supposed to have a knee replaced. My knees are great now, okay? Because your body, again, is beautifully and wonderfully made, and it regenerates a lot of the cells, and all parts of your body, like your skin, regenerates every 60 days, changes. And different parts of your body, some are up to 7 years where it will take to recharge and change. So caffeine affects a lot of this because you're not healing properly at night. That's when you're healing, when you're sleeping. And it affects men and women differently. Okay, first of all, we'll talk about men for a minute. Okay, what does it do to men? Well, when you have that adrenaline rush, your blood pressure goes up. If you're not doing anything, there's no reason. And then you're drinking your caffeine, blood pressure keeps going up. Now it comes down, don't misunderstand me. But at some point, your blood pressure gets higher naturally, because you're always in this fight-flight state. So for men particularly, blood pressure is a deal. It also affects testosterone in men, and that is a big deal, particularly when you want to reproduce. Okay, because at the end of the day, cortisol and testosterone do not get along. So the more cortisol you have in your body, the less testosterone you're going to have and produce. And what does testosterone do? Well, it helps build muscle. It helps libido. Okay, so it makes you want to have sex, so you want to have babies. It also affects the motility and the mobility of your sperm. And so it fractures the sperm. Now, when you do that, you have a less chance of conception. Am I telling you that people that drink caffeine don't have babies? Absolutely not, because they're having babies every day, by the millions probably. However, if you are in that situation where you're trying to have a baby and you're struggling, this could be a contributing factor. Now we'll get to the women. Now, remember, when we talked about women have a lot more hormonal stuff going on than men. And where a lot of that's coming right through their adrenal glands. And that's right where the caffeine is going to mess with them. And we talked a little bit about how they process caffeine in different phases of their menstrual cycle. But also then, women have a little bit shorter sleep cycle than men. I don't know if this was because of nature, because women are oftentimes more caregivers in the home with kids, and they get up more. But their sleep cycle, so they're naturally more prone to have more anxiety during the day than men. So then you throw caffeine on there in whatever form. And then we go back to that list that you read, and it's just amazing the things that happen there. And so the woman gets up in the morning, she's already anxious, she's already tired, she's still tired because her circadian rhythm's messed up. So what does she do? She drinks more caffeine. Now that throws oil on a fire in her menstrual cycle, especially with PMS and cramps and things like that. But what it also does is it affects the blood flow to the uterus. And so if the less blood flow, the less chance of conception. Now, you take a man and a woman who are trying to have a baby and they're both drinking caffeine, and sometimes a lot of caffeine. This could be a mitigating factor in conception. So my advice is, hey, just stop drinking caffeine for a while and see if you have a baby, right? I mean, it seems like such an easy thing, but it's not easy because they have to quit, and quitting caffeine is not easy. And I'm not discounting that at all. Okay, so that'd be the first thing in a woman. The second thing is, and I briefly touched on this, and that is the pregnant woman. Okay, now as adults, we all have free will and free will, so we control what goes in our bodies. The fetus does not. The fetus is getting all its nutrients from mom. So whatever mom's eating, drinking, that's what the fetus gets. Now here's something that nobody ever talks about because nobody probably knows. I mean, there's an enzyme in our liver as adults. It's called CPY1E2. And that enzyme, your liver processes 95% of the caffeine that you drink. That enzyme does not develop in a baby until it's 3 to 6 months old. So when it's in the womb, the baby is holding on to all the caffeine that mom is drinking. Now picture this. Baby's born. 12 hours later, baby starts screaming bloody murder. What does the doctor, what do the nurses say? Oh, this is common. This is normal. Your baby's colicky. You know, they don't ever think that maybe this baby is in caffeine withdrawal, because you do realize that the reason why when people quit cold turkey caffeine is that their adenosine receptors open up. And you have this massive blood flow to your brain, and you get one big headache. I had this when I quit 2 years ago. It was terrible. It lasted for 3 days. And then I was also brain fog and fatigue for 3 days because adenosine is what puts you to sleep. So baby then has this massive adenosine headache. Now realize that when moms come in that are addicted to drugs, the doctors know this, and when the baby's born, they detox and take the baby through withdrawal, because if you don't, technically the baby could die from withdrawal. Okay, because it's so intense, because it's immediate. But what else happens in the womb? Okay, and these are documented studies. Caffeine can lead to low birth weight. It can lead to miscarriage. It can lead to stillbirth. It can lead to developmental problems after baby's born. It can lead to ADD, ADHD, and also physical things that aren't, because they're not developing in the womb like they would normally, because the caffeine is in there messing with everything, right? I have 2 miscarriages and a stillbirth in my immediate family. And as crazy as this sounds, the death of a baby in miscarriage or stillbirth impacts so many more people than the baby and the parents. You I'd have 2 more grandchildren now if my daughter had an miscarriage. My niece had an open casket funeral for a 7-month-old fetus. And if that doesn't hurt your heart out, you don't have heart. Okay, now I'm not telling you that caffeine caused any of this. Okay, I have an idea. So in my mission, my micro mission statement is, if I can influence one pregnant woman to stop drinking caffeine while she's pregnant and she has a healthy baby, I or you or someone that's listening to this may have been responsible for saving a life. And I'll tell you what, how many people get to say that in the world? 8.5 billion people. Very few people get to say that. There could be some doctors, the surgeons, that are heart attack people. But we have this ability here by spreading this message to someone that you love or someone that you know that says, okay, listen to what Steve had to say here. Do a little bit of research there. You don't want to know because of cognitive dissonance. But then you look at the baby, breast milk has a certain amount of caffeine. If mom would just quit for 9 months and then go back on it, go ahead. I don't care. It's okay. Because there's not a whole lot of caffeine being transferred in the breast milk. And then we haven't even talked about what it does to teens and young adults, because it's devastating for their development. And ironically, this is something I learned. Teenagers actually, their circadian rhythm is 2 hours later than adults. So when kids, let's say 14, even 18, they say, I'm not there at 10 o'clock. I'm not going to bed. It's because they're not. Because their circadian rhythm says 11, 11:30, 12 o'clock, that's when you should be tired. Now, just think of that kid, that teenager that stays up hour and a half, 2 hours later than they should to get their 8 hours or 9 hours. And then they wake up at 6 or 7 o'clock to go to school. Guess what? They're tired. And what are they going to do? They're going to go through Starbucks. They're going to go through whatever. They might get up and have coffee with their mom and dad. They might have a Diet Coke or Diet Soda with caffeine or an energy drink because they're tired. And I have documented studies that show, and they can control some of this, and they're done with randomly controlled trials. They took a group of college students who were studying for finals, and they looked at them and they said, okay, we're going to take a caffeinated group and a non-caffeinated group, and we're going to see how their test results work out. Well, the group that didn't drink caffeine while they were studying, their grades were better. Their test results were better. And that's because the kids that were drinking caffeine, that artificial buzz that you get doesn't necessarily give you any more clarity, it just makes you more wide awake. Then when they go down, when they start to crash from the adrenaline, cortisol, dopamine hit that they got from the caffeine, what's happening is that their brains are mush. You have brain fatigue, you have brain fog. And so at that point, you're not getting anything out of study. And so long term, all you're doing with caffeine is you are stealing your energy from maybe 5 hours or tomorrow, and you're just borrowing it. And so you might want to check your Zoom. You zoomed in on your head.
Yeah, I don't know why it's doing that.
There you go. I was looking at the top of your head. And there it goes again. Yeah. Okay.
I was going to say to you as well, I don't know why it keeps doing that. I was going to say to you that in teenagers, they're mostly in their limbic system as well. So you add caffeine on top of that and you wonder why they're so agitated. And Starbucks, sorry to say it, they target these kids. It's easy money.
Yes. Yep, it is. And then you throw the sugar in there to boot. I mean, a lot of those sugary drinks with all the caffeine, there's more sugar in some of those one drinks than they should have all day. Okay, and that's just one. And so, yes, you're right, and thank you. That's a very good observation. And they're targeting. There's a lot of there's 1 or 2 countries now in the world that have banned soda machines in their schools, but if you know where I live in northern Wisconsin in the States, and you go to any school and you can go and buy a Mountain Dew or a Coke or a Pepsi at any vending machine in the hallway. And why? Is because, you know why? Because the companies are paying the schools money to put their machines in there. And they're using it because they're all out of money and they can't tax the people any more than they are. And so what they do is they get, I mean, and we're not talking just a couple bucks. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars. The markup, I mean, let's face it, the markup on a can of soda is probably hundreds and hundreds of % because all they're doing is selling carbonated water with some caffeine and a little bit of sugar in it. And so you look at this whole cycle that we're in, and how do we break the cycle? Well, it's how adults and parents present themselves to their kids. That is what will break the cycle. And that's not easy because that means that my dad can be sucking a cup of coffee first thing in the morning, which for them is a big deal. It's not easy to quit. However, it's easier to quit physically than and that short-term quit than it is to continue to be quitting. And because there's social stigma. I mean, I had breakfast with a friend of mine a couple of months ago, and the waitress came up and said, would you guys like some coffee before you order? And he said, sure, I'll have a cup. And I said, I'll have a decaf. And he literally slammed his hands down on the table and he looked at me and he said, decaf? And I said, yeah, caffeine doesn't agree with me. And I'm a good friend of his. So about 10 minutes later, I said, you realize that what you said to me before, 9 out of 10 people would have had a regular cup of coffee because you socially pressured them, you peer pressured them into believing that you had to do that. And this happens all the time. You know, alcohol is a big deal with alcohol. You know, you go into a bar, if you don't order a drink, you're an outcast. You're not part of the herd, right? Well, at coffee break at work, and let's face it, most of the coffee at work is free. And they're doing that for a very good reason because they think they're getting more productivity from their workers, which in the long run they probably aren't, but that's for a different day. But you go into your coffee break and you've been drinking coffee with these people for 10 years. And all of a sudden you either brew a pot of decaf, or you bring decaf coffee, and they look at you and all of a sudden you're not one of them. You are now the rebel. You know, you and I are rebels, Jihad. We're rebels because we're talking about things that nobody wants to hear. You know, we're laughing about it because we understand, you know, you have a good, solid background in self-sabotage, and you know what it's like to not be part of the herd. Okay. Because in society, being part of the herd is what makes you comfortable, and your subconscious wants you to be there. Your subconscious doesn't like controversy. It doesn't like being a rebel. So we've reprogrammed our minds, and how can you do this? Well, you can do it with hypnotherapy, you do it with affirmations. The best time to do it is when you get up in the morning, or last when you go to bed, because those are the best times when you're as an adult. You still have some theta brainwave times. You do have some while you sleep as well, but if you go to bed at night and right before you go to sleep, you say, okay, first of all, you thank whoever you want to thank. I happen to thank God that he kept me through the day and he kept me healthy. And I thank him for everything that he gave me, because every day is a blessing. And whoever you want to thank, just thank anybody. Okay. But when you go to sleep like that, you have programmed your mind now, your subconscious to sleep in gratitude. Okay. So like when we do hypnotherapy sessions for quitting caffeine, we suggest that they do them right before they go to bed, because that's what's going to be in their subconscious. And after 30 days, you can reprogram your subconscious. And you can do this with any addiction, whether it's cigarettes, whether it's alcohol, whether it's drugs. You know, and I do a lot of podcasts. I've done 3 or 4 podcasts on recovery and addiction. And at the end of the day, they're all the same. And that is, you quit, and then but how you stay quitting. And I'm going to send you some links for your listeners. And one is a tools and tracker. And what it does, it gives you an idea. The first way to address your addiction or whatever it is you want to call it is to acknowledge how much you're actually drinking. And my daughter is a perfect example. She's a natural health practitioner. And 3 weeks ago, she went to New York City to a seminar for a new supplement company. And in that seminar, they did testing. And so she got hooked up with a guy who tested her, and he was a pretty sharp guy. And she doesn't say that loosely because she's very critical of some of the practitioners in her field. And he told her that her second biggest sensitivity was caffeine, which just her jaw dropped. So this is a Sunday. So she gets home late Sunday night. Monday morning, she calls me. She tells me about her experience. She said, I gotta get off of caffeine, so I'm going to go down to 75 milligrams a day. I said, no, hold on here. We need to figure out what you're actually drinking. Well, we figured out that she was at a minimum of 240 milligrams a day, probably more like 350, which is chronic caffeine use. And if she'd went on 75 milligrams, she'd had some major withdrawal. So we decided she'd go to 150 for a week, then 100 for a week, then 50 for a week. And last week she called, we had a conversation. I see her every week. And she's our primary caregiver, but I also see her socially. She said, I forgot to have my cup of coffee this morning. At 11:30, she had this killer headache. And all of a sudden, the light went on and said, whoa, I didn't make caffeine. She immediately had a cup of coffee, the headache went away. So I talked to her yesterday, and she's supposed to be in her 50 milligram week now. She's weaning off, and she's getting closer. She said, so I'm down to, one Zevia and one cup of coffee. So that's pretty close to 50. I said, no. I said, that's more like 80 to 120. And that was supposed to be your first stage, right? So now she has to reevaluate again what she's drinking. So that's in that tools and trackers. And then we got mood journals. We've got, sleep journals, because all these things are important to you acknowledging and realizing your relationship with caffeine and or any other addiction. Now, I'm going to make a really philosophical statement here. It's hard to be healthy. Okay. This is not easy. And so anybody that thinks they're just going to quit caffeine, it's going to be a piece of cake. Yes, you could be the exception and you might just be able to do this. Okay.
I am the exception. I drank coffee
Are you?
I drank coffee for 10 years and I quit 10 years ago. And the reason why I stopped is that I was just meditating, and this little voice in my mind just said, you got to stop drinking so much coffee because it's affecting, your meditations and stuff. And what I was drinking was the brewed Folgers, the allegedly 100% Colombian in the big red container. And I would just have...
I see it.
Yeah, I would have exactly one cup. And that one cup would make me feel nervous. And eventually I started getting panic attacks and stuff like that. And I'd never drank that type of coffee years before that. I mainly drank like Nescafe or something like that, which was the instant. And I realized, you know what? This is not working out for me anymore. And I just stopped. I didn't wean myself or anything, and I didn't have any headaches or anything like that. I just felt really tired. And unfortunately, the day that I stopped was, I think it was a Thursday. So the Friday I was dragging ass the whole day. But then I went to bed early that night, really early, and I slept late the Saturday. And then I got another good night's sleep Saturday night to Sunday morning. And I realized, you know what? My body actually feels pretty good. And I was just like, you know what? I'm hooked on this feeling. And so I'm the exception.
Right. That is a great observation right there. I am now hooked on my healthy body. I'm going to use that line in the future if you don't mind, because that is a fantastic way to put it, and in some of the anecdotal stories I have, they've referred to that, the one guy in particular he was drinking espresso shots to make a decision to go to church, to go to a meeting, and he's the guy that after 6 months off of caffeine said, I now wake up and I feel like I've had 2 or 3 espresso shots, and that is a natural way to wake up. And he loves his life now. He loves waking up and having that natural energy.
Let's talk about what you just said really quickly too, for people to understand this. You said he loves his life now. Many caffeine users have a really bad relationship with victimhood, or the circumstances and situations that they find themselves in commonly. They don't feel like they have it to give. There's a direct correlation between depression and immediate caffeine use, whereas people feel like I'm just downtrodden. I just don't have the energy to give because I'm sad all the time. And rather than try to figure out why they're unfulfilled, why they have longing and discontent, which is a natural part of life. There's always going to be phases of longing and discontent. What they do is they go for a little bit more caffeine, or they go for alcohol and things like that. So if someone is listening to this and that's you, take a hard look at what it is you believe about your life and start looking for solutions to improve your life. And think about it. Do you really need to kill your body with substances? Because essentially that's what you're doing. If it becomes an unhealthy use of caffeine, then because I remember, I still remember, I know you remember because you're older than I am, but I still remember how the other generations were, where their caffeine use was normal, quote unquote. It was a cup of coffee and then they were off to the races for the day, or a cup of tea or something. And that was it. But now the conditioning has really taken hold, and it's gotten hold of so many people. And it's almost like people associate being American with a cup of coffee as well. Or, the other, like semantics, as Alfred Korzybski would call it, the psychology of nationalism, where how much coffee you drink is somehow predetermined in your culture. Greek people drink a certain amount of coffee a certain way. French people drink a certain amount of coffee a certain way, And so
I did a podcast with a lady from Colombia who was raised in Colombia, and she was very adamant about this. In her baby bottle, half it was coffee, half it was milk. That had changed. She's 40 now, and that, I believe that's probably changed a little bit. But in that culture, and this refers exactly what you just said, we are looking at cultural differences. People in France, they live on coffee. I just talked to a lady. I talked to a guy in England who was from France, and another guy from Holland, and they live on coffee. And they don't think anything of it, but they don't understand all the physical implications, of hypertension, being anxious, and because we're men, we're not supposed to talk about our emotions, right? We're supposed to be, we don't talk about this stuff. Well, it's affecting your hormones as well as a man, and you will have more anxiety, you will have nervousness. So what do? You do exactly what you just said. You have another cup of coffee, or you have enough tea, or you have an energy drink. Because what it does, it gives you the cortisol, it gives you the dopamine, it gives you the adrenaline. Okay, those are short-term fixes for a long-term problem. While you sleep, all that goes away. So what do you got to do when first thing you wake up in the morning? You got to rejuice, right? And so, you make some really valid observations here. And my life has changed dramatically. I made my first trip last month. I made my first trip to Florida. We drive to Florida and back. It's 25 hours each way. We don't do it all at once. We stop. First time in my life, 68 years, and I've been driving to Florida for 34 years. First time in my life, I drove all the way there and all the way back and didn't have any caffeine. And when I got to the hotel the first night, I had driven for 12 and a half hours. And Brenda hit the button in the elevator. And I looked there, I said, I have never felt this good after driving 12 and a half hours. And I went into the room and I went to sleep. Because in the past, I would use caffeine as a crutch to stay alert, to stay awake. Oh, I got to have this. I'll kill it, right? Or I'll kill somebody else. Well, it turns out I didn't. I didn't need it. But what I would do then is I would get into the hotel room at 11, 12 o'clock at night and lay in bed for an hour to 3 hours because realize I'm not on caffeine. So this is messing with me big time. And I'd lay there. So then I wake up after 4 hours of sleep. Now I got to drive 10 hours or 12 hours the next day. What am I going to do? I'm going to have a cup of coffee and another cup and another cup. And I generally would quit by 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but obviously it's staying, the half-life is way into where I'm going to bed. And so, my call here, my message is to evaluate your relationship with caffeine. Because each one of us have a different relationship with it. You had yours, which is in the 10 years, and mine's 2 years. In the past, have I had a can of caffeinated soda in between? Yes, I have. Admit it. I mean, it's been, I think, maybe 3 or 4 weeks since I had a can of diet soda that had caffeine in it, and I drink it at 8 or 9 o'clock in the mornings so they know I'm going to sleep well at night. The reason I drink it is because it's sitting in my patio. I bought it before I did the book and everything. And I was drinking caffeinated diet soda while I was writing the book, and I didn't know it had caffeine in it. Okay, here I am, the subject matter expert, and I'm drinking Diet Dr. Pepper, and I look at the can one day, and it's got caffeine in it. And then I looked at Diet Sundrop, and I don't know if it's a citrus soda, and it's fairly popular. It's on every grocery store shelf. It's got caffeine in it. It's a citrus soda that has caffeine. And of all the 12-ounce cans of soda, Sundrop has the highest milligrams of caffeine in it. And who knows that? Nobody. First of all, you don't read what's in a can of soda because you can't pronounce 95% of it. Okay, you can pronounce caffeine, but you don't ever look at it. And so reevaluate what. And caffeine is everywhere. Okay, it's in medications. It's in chocolate. A lady asked me last week, I love chocolate. Can I eat chocolate? I sure you can eat chocolate. Just realize that in 1 ounce, 8 ounce candy bar, chocolate bar, there could be 80 or more milligrams of caffeine in that chocolate. So it's a little distraught, just to know. I didn't make her day because, that was her last respite of caffeine. Now, I don't control what she eats. It's up to her. So, again, and we talked about the PMS stuff. Okay. Ironically, a lot of the PMS medications have 30 to 60 milligrams of caffeine in each tablet. Well, it makes you feel better because of all the things your body does, but it makes your menstrual cycle and your cramps worse because caffeine is aggravating all this. And so, different times and caffeine affects everybody differently. Beware of how it affects you. I would just urge you that if you know someone that's being negatively affected and if their health is being negatively affected and no one knows why, it could be caffeine, because you realize that doctors also have cognitive dissonance. So if they have a patient come in and it's the classic symptoms of caffeine abuse, but they drink caffeine, their first response is, that can't be caffeine because that doesn't happen to me.
And these poor doctors and nurses that have to drink a cup of coffee or a tea just to make it through the night shift, I mean, they don't know any better either.
No, they don't. You're right. And so there's natural ways to get energy stimulants, go quite a bit in the book. But, the natural stimulants don't have caffeine that you can use. Okay. But the thing is, is not to have that. If you can live naturally, and that overnight thing, that is a can of worms that we can't get into, because when you work overnight, when you work that third shift, your circadian rhythm is so messed up that it's almost impossible sometimes to make it through the night without doing something. Okay, and I don't necessarily have the answer for that. My answer is only try to get on a first or second shift where it doesn't mess with your circadian rhythm. I mean, that's the best advice I can give you. And many, and I know a lot of shift workers here in the States, their beginning jobs are third shift, because that's the crappy shift. And they work their way in the second and then first shift, and then their circadian rhythm can come back. Your body can heal from this, and it can take literally 6 months to 18 months or longer sometimes to get back to normal. I follow a number of Facebook groups of quitting caffeine, and I read the stories. And I'll tell you what, I feel so bad for these people, because they've been on so much caffeine and their bodies have been so messed up. But they also have to eat the right food, and they have to get sunshine. They got to get vitamin D. You got to do these things, because it's a group effort in making yourself healthy. It's what you eat. It's what you drink. It's getting, we talk a lot about in recovery is using breathing exercises, just to get some oxygen into your body, to walk for 10 minutes or 20 minutes on your lunch break. Instead of sitting around having coffee, go for a walk. One, you're outside, you're in the sun, you're getting vitamin D, your body is going to be better, and your brain just feels so good when you go for a walk, because you're getting all this extra oxygen, and you're starting to think well. Nothing is impossible. There's a guy named Randy Pausch. He's been dead now for 15 years. He was a professor at Mellon Carnegie University professor, and he did something called the last lecture. And it literally was his last lecture, because he was dying from cancer, pancreatic cancer. And part of his lecture, you can get this on YouTube, it's very interesting, and it's incredibly motivating, for the simple fact that the observation he made is there's no such thing as no. And the walls are put up to stop you from doing things, not from stopping you, but from stopping the people that don't have the passion or desire to get there. So the wall is high. And who gets over the wall? The people that have the passion and the desire. So you can use that as a motivator to say to yourself, okay, I'm going to quit caffeine. 6 weeks ago, I was at my daughter's house, and a guy came up, and 8 weeks ago, he had just quit. I just got the book out, and he took a copy. He started reading it. It was a social gathering. There were about 14 people there. He just sat in a chair and started to read the book. He quit caffeine the next day, and his wife texted me yesterday. They had just taken a trip to North Carolina, and he had no caffeine all the way there and all the way back. He quit. He hasn't had caffeine for eight weeks. And was I partially responsible? Probably, because of the book. But at the end of the day, it's individual choice. And I'll say it again, we all have free will and free won't. And I'll leave you with this message. And this is a Brendaism. This is from my wife, and she's a very wise woman. You can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. However, you can make it thirsty. And my role is to make people thirsty for knowledge about health and hopefully about caffeine. So I can kind of leave it there.
Okay, well, I was just thinking to myself, what would you like to say in conclusion, apart from that, to give people some kind of, I don't want to use the word hope, but to give them the right idea from which to operate from, because it all starts with an idea, and it has to be the right one.
Yes.
It can't be out of fear, or you're not going to succeed. You're going to go right back into self-sabotage.
Exactly. I would say that evaluate how you feel when you get up, throughout the day, and when you go to bed. And if you don't think you're your best self, evaluate what you're putting into your body and what you're doing with your body during the day. Okay. Once again, if you get a good night's sleep, you're going to wake up feeling like $1 million. That's all there is to it, unless you have some other maladies. Okay. And so my word of encouragement would be that, first of all, you can do this. I mean, you see people overcome so many things. Have a plan. Okay. That would probably be my best piece of advice. Have a plan. Because you just go, back in the day when I was in restaurant and bar business, people would come up and say, I'm going to try to quit smoking tomorrow. And I would laugh at them, not laugh, but I would chuckle and I'd say, just don't waste your time. Don't waste my time. You're going to be crabby. You're going to be crabby at me. I'm going to be crabby at you. I said, if you're just trying to do this, you're going to fail every time. You either do it or you don't do it. And either way is okay. It's that Henry Ford saying, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Okay. I mean, I know that's a cliche and it's 100 years old, but it's the truth. And so when you say to yourself, okay, I'm going to quit coffee. I'm going to quit caffeine. I don't need to do this in one day. And you don't. This can be over 8 weeks, can be over 6 months. But at the end of the day, if you actually accomplish that goal, you are going to be a better person. You're going to get your life back because caffeine is no longer controlling. You mentioned in one of your comments, you are controlled because when you put down and come off of the high, you have one or two things. You either suck up or you have more caffeine. And sucking up is not fun. And so you can find me at releasethecoffeecuffs.com. You can send me an email. I'll respond to you. There's a lot of free information you're going to have in your show notes. You're going to see there's not only the tools and trackers, but there's one of the links goes to a page that has 10 articles on coffee and caffeine. And it's quite interesting because one of them is the 10 nasties in your coffee, because if you're drinking regular coffee, they process it with chemicals. Decaf is particularly nasty because they use chemicals to take the caffeine out of the bean. I drink decaf every day, almost every day. You say, well, you're a hypocrite. No, I drink organic Swiss water processed coffee. And it's not that much more expensive than ordinary decaf, but it's got over 99% of the caffeine's gone. It still has all the good stuff, the polyphenols and all the other good things. And I don't particularly like the taste of coffee, so I put all kinds of stuff in there. Okay, I put in protein powder, I put in turmeric, I put in this and that and another thing, and throw those tea in there just to give it some flavor. And getting all kinds of stuff. I don't like the taste of coffee, so I no longer am drinking just regular coffee. You can do this. There's all kinds of options, but no one's going to do it for you. And again, you don't want to hear that, right? Because everybody, my oldest son's 45 years old and he has high blood pressure. So what does he do? He just takes medication. And we talked to him about it. He's way overweight, smokes a little bit, drinks a lot. You can do this. He said, no, I like my life just the way it is and I'll take the medications. Well, the medications lead to more medications and then on and on and on. We don't need to, that's a rabbit hole, with pharma that is just, that's worth like 3 to 5 podcasts, right? I mean, we could just go on and on and on. The bottom line is, once again, it's hard to do this sometimes. Once you get this down, it's easy. It's easy for me to go throughout my day without caffeine. And I feel, it's 7:30 at night here. I still have a lot of energy. My best time, I do my best work in the morning. I'll be honest. I have energy. I go for a walk. It's sun. I drink water. I do a lot of stuff on the computer. But I still have energy, And when I go to bed and I go to sleep at 10 o'clock at night, generally speaking, and my wife's irritated with me because I'll sometimes go to sleep in 30 seconds. And it takes her a while. So this is quite irritating to her. And I'm not telling you that if you quit caffeine, you're going to sleep in 30 seconds. But this just happens to be a personal thing with me. Unless I do something silly. If I accidentally have caffeine, or if I eat something that doesn't agree with me and I have a stomach ache, then it disrupts my circadian rhythm. But you can do this. You can do it with help from me. There's all kinds of resources in the world. Okay, there's actually there's a Caffeine Anonymous on the internet. There's all kinds of Facebook groups, and if you're any social media, there's groups out there. They will help you, because sometimes it's not easy to do it alone. We need support, and that's a lot of things in life, but in caffeine, it definitely is practical.
Well, Steve, thanks for being on the Boundless Authenticity podcast.
It has been my pleasure. It is a pleasure all speaking with you. It encourages me to see a young man with knowledge you're using it to do good in the world. And you can't imagine how much respect I have for you and how much I admire you for doing that and for hosting a program like this and allowing me to come on and talk about things that some people don't want to hear, right? So thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate that. Thanks again. You're listening to the Boundless Authenticity podcast, where we discuss everything related to the evolution of human consciousness.
At the very least, people need to understand that the United States builds bunkers, which are basically cities underground, every 3 months.
Basically, when you dream, you tap into your subconscious. It is your nocturnal intuition, your creativity and imagination unchained from conscious reason, ego and logic.
They're biologically alive, but they have no soul. They have AI consciousness. They can alter your consciousness of the brain to get the brain.
We live in a multidimensional reality, whether it comes through esoteric information in the spiritual realms or the UFO people, experiencers, or mainstream through quantum physics and through mainstream science now realizing that parallel dimensions probably exist.
We're all spiritual beings. We're all having these human experiences. We've heard that phrase over and over and over. But what does that really mean?
You know, all the big questions of life, we have these answers inside of our souls.
We're ultimately studying the nature of what it is to be human, good and evil, our psychology, how we think, and our health. That's why I love Bruce Lee's great quote, all knowledge is ultimately self-knowledge.
The Boundless Authenticity Podcast.